Hi, I'm Kathy Boudet, Managing Editor of EIX and FamilyBusiness.org. I recently had the pleasure of talking with Noah Alper. He's a serial entrepreneur who has founded several businesses. Alper is best known for Noah's Bagels. 6 years after he opened his first store in 1989, Alper had 38 stores up and down the West Coast. Einstein Brothers bought Noah's in 1996 for $100 million. On the other coast, Alper co-founded a natural food store called Bread Circus. He sold this business to Anthony and Susan Hartnett in 1975. Whole Foods then bought Bread Circus in 1992 for $26.2 million. And along with these companies, Alper started others that were not as well known. Some, he admits, were a flop. But he learned from this experience. And just a few years after his greatest failure, Alper launched the bagel chain that would make him famous. Today, Noah Alper lives on the West Coast and is an advisor to several companies. He's also written a book called Business Mensch, Timeless Wisdom for Today's Entrepreneur. In our discussion, Alper talks about his experiences as a serial entrepreneur, and he shares some advice for those considering it themselves.
I've been passionate about everything I've ever been involved in. And some people just like, they're all about the money. I think this thing will make a lot of money. I'm certainly about making money, but if it were something that aluminum siding, you can make a lot of money at it. For me, getting very excited about the product. One thing advantageous about getting older is you can look back and sort of see patterns.
I love the story in your book about how you saw this man who had this chipped wooden bowl and it had such character, and you actually found the guy who made it in Vermont or New Hampshire.
Right, Vermont, right.
And you picked up a whole bunch of stuff, and on the way home, your Volkswagen bus broke down, and you had to rent a truck and take it the rest of the way. Instinct for, didn't you set that up right outside a natural food store? And
well, actually, I set it up in front of my brother-in-law's bookstore. Which was in a great location in Harvard Square. You're a Bostonian now, so you know where that is. A lot of these lessons, I don't know, my dad was a businessman. We'd hear it around the dining room table, location. And that was certainly a lesson I learned from him. But also, I think on the product side, and that's what you were alluding to, how do you identify a product? How do you know what you want to go into? I can only say it's sort of like a nose. I just smell something that's a trend. I remember being, for instance, in Europe and saying, motor scooters, they're everywhere. Why aren't they in America? Develop a thesis, if you will. But I think what's important is I typically will test a thesis before I'll go full guns on it.
And Bread Circus kind of started small, and then you describe in your book, you started gradually adding more things that.
Right. Well, that was really early into the game. Some of these things have been, I like to use the sort of surfing analogy of, since I've lived in California for a while, of, catching the wave. And Bread Circus was a little bit ahead of the wave. There were, I'll give you an example. These little natural food stores were tiny little stores, tiny little mom and pop stores. We used to cooperatively buy organic groceries from California. I want to say maybe 6 or 8 stores would meet at Logan Airport at 5 o'clock in the morning. We'd have a container full of fresh California organic vegetables, and we'd sit there. Who gets the 10 pounds of carrots, and who gets this and that and the other? And it was very early into the game, and there was a huge learning curve in terms of the consumer having any concept at all as to what we were selling.
Mhm.
But eventually, even in the course of, we only had that store a better part of 3 years.
Mhm.
It started, we could see the momentum starting to build.
Mhm.
Um, it was so early. As an example, I did as you probably read in the book, I did the housewares for a time in parallel to Bread and Circus. And
Mhm.
for instance, John Mackey from Whole Foods had one store in Lamar, Texas, and used to call me up and order salad bowls.
Mhm.
I'd like 6 number 15s, and
Mhm.
I mean, it was like that. That was the state of the industry. Ben and Jerry's, Haagen-Dazs were all brand new companies.
I know you mentioned you talked about the importance of how it kind of takes a village to grow a business, and you
Mhm.
with Noah's you talked about hiring your brother after your mom kind of twisted your arm,
Right,
and then
right.
you hired another gentleman. He was a real growth expert.
Jim Mises, who had opened like 400 Taco Bells
That's right. That's
in the Southwest region, who had operated them. Yes. So it really it became, within a year of my starting that first store, it became a total team effort.
yeah.
And I wouldn't even say, well, it was complicated. We had, my brother and his partner were licensees. I was a licensor, but eventually rolled that all together into one company.
Mhm.
And then we had, I've always been, I was interested in sports as a kid, and team sports was always very important to me. And it was very much a centerpiece of my father's success in business. And
Mhm.
he touted that again and again, that, if his employees were happy, I mean, just like basic fundamentals.
Yeah.
Employees are happy, they're gonna really put out for you. And I mean, the metrics on Noah's were, we had half the turnover rate of comparable quick serve retailers, and uh, our brand was second only to McDonald's in the San Francisco Bay region in terms of name recognition. So we were doing something right.
With the employees, I know you pretty much let your employees be themselves, and
Yeah.
you didn't mind if they had tattoos. You let them eat as many bagels as they want, whereas there were some other stingier businesses that wouldn't let them eat any food. I think that probably, people like to be treated well, and I think you're going to have happy customers too.
No question, no question. And we would get accolades from our customers. I mean, it was an integral part of our success.
Mhm.
Was the whole customer experience, and even, in some cases, in many cases, I mean, Sunday morning at our store was just nuts. So to keep customers happy and willing to come back was a challenge. Like, I love the bagels, but I don't need this.
You were savvy enough in your big businesses, though the heavy hitters, which were Bread and Circus and Noah's,
Mhm.
um, to know to hire the type of people who could make up for what you didn't really like to do. Is that good advice for people who?
Definitely, but I think I like to do is probably the two go hand in hand. I would also add, not so good at doing,
Mhm.
because I think a major problem. I don't think, I know a major problem entrepreneurs have when businesses grow is that, what how many things are we good at? How many
Mhm.
things is anybody good at? What is it? 10%, 20, 30, whatever it is, percent of things that other people can do a lot better than you. Bring in the talent. And what I've talked to people in my own, coaching milieu is, if you can't afford a full-time marketer or a full-time ops guy or this or that or the other, get a consultant.
Yep.
If you don't have the money, buy him a lunch or barter or something. But whatever it is, get that expertise, whether it's on a consultative basis or on an ongoing basis. And don't try to go it alone if there's things that you simply are just not great at.
So you've said in interviews like that you enjoy the process of starting companies. Obviously, you
Mhm.
started like 6 or 7 of them, but then you told it in an interview, or I can't remember who it was, that you kind of get
Mhm.
bored after a while. And so, would you describe yourself as more of a? I mean, apparently, there's two types of entrepreneurs. There's intuitives who know a good thing when they see it, and then
Mhm.
there's the analytical guys who won't do anything until they, crunch all the numbers. You're more of an intuitive type.
Yeah, for sure.
So is that so at what point, like when does the boredom sit in?
It's
Ah,
more like the initial success.
mhm,
Like the creative process of bringing it from an idea into fruition and opening the doors is what excites me. And once it's operating, it's not that I'm not interested in it, it's that the thrill is gone. Yeah, that's not the exciting part for me. Well, I must say, with Noah's, I mean, well, we all come from previous experience. Okay, so if you recall, Noah's came from the experience of basically a colossal failure with the Holy Land Foods.
mhm.
Okay, so coming from a place of, I don't know where my next dime's going to come from, to all of a sudden having lines around the block, that was pretty darn exciting, and that took a number of that took better part of 5 years for that thrill to,
Right.
wear off. But after 5 years and a lot of growth
Mhm.
and stabilization, it was a fast rocket ride. And then it got into, a mundanity, if you will, and I was kind of ready to move on at that point.
So with your businesses, was there something that would, I mean, I guess they're all different, but when did you know it was time to leave?
Except for Noah's, they were small businesses.
Mhm.
Okay, even Bread and Circus, it became very large, but that wasn't our doing. I wanted to be public about that. We gave a very we developed a great store, but it was one store, and then the individual that bought the store created the largest natural food chain in New England,
Mhm.
and one of the largest in the country. And I think that our base gave him that wherewithal.
Mhm.
We had a good operation, but he brought it to the next level. So in that case, I had just simply had enough of the retail business, and I said, I'm not, that I'm never going to go into the retail business as long as I live.
Mhm.
Okay. So only fast forward 20 years later to have 38 stores from
Never.
Seattle to Los Angeles. So never say never.
Yeah.
But it was a mom and pop store, trapped in the store, got to get out of here. Regarding the all but Noah's, I did this, I started it, the thrill's gone, I want out. When it came to Noah's, as I mentioned, it was a total team situation then. We had Starbucks as a partner, we had a venture capital partner, our store managers had stock. So it was a consensus in that case that we were fundamentally given an offer that was too good to refuse, and we were facing, potentially major competition. And Einstein said, you have two options: you can sell to us, or you can look for one of our stores across from every one of your stores from Seattle to Los Angeles. And they had the wherewithal to do it. So
Mhm.
we had a pretty easy ride from our inception to that point. We looked at it: should we take them on, or should we accept the offer?
No, I don't recall this detail, but you got to keep the Noah's brand kind of stayed as it was.
Yeah, that was their decision.
Yeah.
That was their decision
They
based
knew a
on
good
the
thing when they saw it.
yeah. They were a very strong brand.
Mhm.
Um, there was a piece in the middle there, and so I wanted to enumerate that because I think it's significant. Was that their first offer the previous year was a stock deal. It wasn't cash. The consensus amongst the group was, I'm not sure about the stability of this company as much as they're flying high.
Mhm.
None of us was too interested in taking their stock. We waited a year. We got a better offer. It was all cash. We took it. A year and a half after that, that Einstein company went out of business. The parent company went bankrupt, and somebody else. There's been a couple of iterations of outfits that have picked up, the chain. But were we to have taken that deal, we would have got roughly 10 cents on the dollar.
Oh my gosh. So you really played it smart when you decided when you pulled the plug, and the terms.
Right. Because you just got to know who you're dealing with, and you have to make judgment calls every step along the way.
So did you do anything special, like as you prepared to exit your businesses? Was there anything special you had to do to the business to get it ready?
Good question. I'm trying to think back. There's been a few of them. The truth is not really. I was encouraged to stay on as fundamentally an ambassador when Einstein's bought Noah's. So I had to agree to that. That was something that had to be done in advance.
The other ones, did you just basically turn over the keys and then leave?
I basically did, but this was kind of interesting, was that the individual that bought Bread Circus was a customer before he purchased it. And so at one point during the negotiations, he had an Irish accent, which I can't totally imitate at all, but he said something like, "Noah, have you ever had a rodent problem?" And I'm like, well, Anthony, as a matter of fact, we did have some mice. We got open barrels, natural foods. In the old days, it was all barrels. We ameliorated the problem. And so he said, I ask that because you might remember I told you about this 2 years ago when I was a customer here. And I said, oh yeah, I do sort of remember some guy asking me about rodents. So what he said to me, and this is where it sort of ties in with the Einsteins, is that he wanted to know who he was dealing with here. So if I was to say, no, I'm selling you this great business, and we never had a problem in the world, he would have looked at the purchase of that business differently, and would have really gone into it, offered me less money. He wanted to study very carefully who he was going to buy the business from. And so I think that in terms of preparation to sell a business, reputation is definitely part of the package. Accountants call it goodwill, but all these little things, play into it. So many businesses now are internet related. Maybe there's glitches in the software that are comparable to the rodents and the peanuts, but one way or the other, running a good operation, and when you're going to sell it, not having to, hide behind problems is always a good thing.
Now, talking about making money, with your two biggest ventures, you had several partners involved by the time the big payoff came.
Right.
Are you happy with bringing in the partners, to help the company grow, even if it meant you had less when you?
I do. There's a Yiddish expression, a chazer, which chazer means a pig. Okay, so you can be a chazer, and where does it get you? But this isn't exactly that. This is about a calculated opportunity, and our venture partner in particular sort of laid it out very, concisely. Like, look, we've been there, done that. We know the ropes. We got a big Rolodex. People don't even know what a Rolodex is anymore, but big contact list. Okay, and we can get you where you want to go. We're going to take a bite out of you, but believe me, you're going to do better if you join us than if you don't. I bought the thesis. And we all bought the thesis, and it was the same as when Starbucks wanted to come in. We knew that they were going to be able to take us to the next level, and as a result of partnering with Starbucks, we got absolutely premier real estate opportunities presented to us. We'd go in and, partner with Starbucks and get a large footprint. We'd get a better deal and better locations, and it just worked better. It was the ability to look at the big picture and not get hung up on, oh boy, that's going to be 7% less than I wanted.
Smaller piece of a bigger pie, right?
No question.
So are there any of your businesses that you've missed being part of?
I enjoyed the housewares business a lot, specifically the foreign travel aspect of it, because I was fortunate enough to travel all around the world sourcing products, and I found that just to be fascinating in terms of learning local culture through a business context. I wouldn't mind running around the world, even now. I mean, I enjoyed that a lot. The action at Noah's, it was so intense. First of all, bagels, a very fast business. I love speed. I love, moving fast. And it's a little hard to slow down after experience like that. Even all these years later, I get up in the morning, I'm run. Even though I don't exactly need to, and I don't exactly have where all to run to, I'm still running.
Now, as you look back on your career, what has been the biggest mistake you've made, and what have you learned from it?
I I think the biggest mistake I made, but I sort of skated through it with just a whole lot of luck.
Mhm.
Was not really. Let me put it this way: in the do as I say, not as I do department. Um, all of my businesses have been learning on the job. I had no idea how to make a bagel, and I relied on others. And truth be told, I made them once and they didn't come out good. That was the last time I made the bagels. I said, look, I was good at selling the bagels. I wasn't so great at making the bagels. I'll just give you a side example of what I'm trying to say, in the sense that that was a mistake, and it left us very vulnerable. I wanted to clarify what I said before. You can't be good at everything, and it's good to get people who can. You've got to do things you're not good at, and you've got to learn and do as best as you can and not give up, which is what I fundamentally did with production and the finer points of making the bagels. As an example, was that our equipment dealers who were on the inside wound up actually knocking us off in terms of our recipe, in terms of our, all of our store design and so forth and so on, the methodologies and so forth and so on. We did have a maven, if you will, a bagel baker who helped us every step along the way.
Guy from Rhode Island, right?
Guy from Rhode Island, but yours truly was not, as knowledgeable about all that stuff as we needed to be. So we had to bring these people in all the time to fix our equipment and to, advise us on new equipment, so on and so on. We were kind of at their beholden to them, and that allowed them to gather enough, trade secrets and so forth to go out and take us on. Now, granted, they didn't do a great job at it, and it didn't turn out to be a major problem, but it was a kind of a minor thorn in our side that we didn't need.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
if I had sort of like say, okay, I'm not great at detail work at baking and so on and so on, but I need to really drill down on this. And that was something then in retrospect I could have worked, all the way along the line. I could have worked harder at. I could have worked harder at understanding finance. My early business, this is shocking for you to hear, but I didn't really understand the difference between profitability and cash flow. And when I wound up, running out of money, and yet the business was doing really well, I didn't understand it. And I have noticed that everyone wants to be an entrepreneur and wants to be in business now. It's the lingo. Everybody understands these things way, way more than we did back in the 60s. But I had to learn the hard way, and had to come, hands and knees on to a bank to get to get a revolving line of credit because I was in the import business, and there was a lag time between the sale and rather the purchase and the sale, and I needed to make that up with short-term financing. Now, of course, I understand it, but I didn't at the time, and that was a mistake.
Well, you know what? I think that you've certainly seen enough stories out of Silicon Valley about, things that go on that are less than savory. And your book makes
Right.
the point that you really can go far being a good person, taking care of your employees. Sounds like that type of thinking is kind of hard to come by nowadays.
Yeah.
You do
Yeah.
a lot of consulting. How
Yeah.
much do you consult with people about stuff like character and doing the right thing and doing right for employees?
I always try to weave it in. There's specific business issues, but there's also character issues. I am quite sure that I have heard statistics in the past that if you drill down on it, that sort of like socially conscious and ethical, sustainable, are for the most part going to do better in business. So that is something that I've come to believe. Whether it's true or not, I do believe it. I also feel, again, I guess, with the ability to be able to look back at what I've done, to run an ethical business, to do the right thing, if you will. When you're all done with it, and while you're doing it, and you're trying to sleep at night, it's just a healthier, happier way to live. This country, we're so obsessed about making money. Making money's great, but you're doing it in a sleazy way. I know at the end of the day, I don't think you're going to be as happy as you are as if you do the right way, even if you don't make as much money. That's my contention.
Have you ever counseled any family businesses?
Yes, I have, and I also come from a family business background in the sense that my father's business was a total family business. My brother wound up taking it over. My second brother worked there for a while. I kind of learned about that one around the kitchen table, but there was a lot to learn.
What are the biggest problems, issues you see within family businesses as opposed to, I mean, you've seen both types of businesses.
All the baggage and the backstories and the childhood issues and the father treated me different than you, and it's not exactly articulated, but it's always there under the surface. This is the successful one, this is the black sheep. It just all gets played out in a business context. And the non-family business, it's much more objective. Yeah, there are personalities, there's drama, but there's not sort of all that baggage that either loads it up both positively, negatively, and it's a moving target. It's very positive and then it isn't. For instance, the issues with my older brother and I, who we basically did Noah's together. Old stuff came up, but there is a dynamic where the rising tide floats all ships. So we were fortunate that things went well. But at the drop of a hat, things could have been very, very differently, and old dynamics would have kicked in. And it's kind of hard to avoid it. Having outside coaching can really create, morph a very personal dynamic to a more objective business dynamic, which is a lot easier to tackle.
Now, when you ran the restaurant, were there family members involved in that?
Well, my wife was very involved. She became our catering manager, and that was kind of interesting too. I hadn't thought about this until you brought it up, but I would have to say, unfortunately, came from kind of a patriarchal family, and she wanted to do this job, and we needed the job. And I was sort of afraid she hadn't done this before, and could she do it? And I sort of downplayed her capability because of marital MO. The guy's the boss. Turns out she did a fabulous job. And I just finally said, what, let it go, man. Let it go. She's doing great. Give her the respect that she needs and run with it.
What other words of wisdom can you offer for people who are contemplating entrepreneurship, new entrepreneurs who are kind of unsure of the waters? What could you tell them from your own experiences?
Well, I would say like one thing that I think has been one of the keys to my success is really bringing in a lot of input into the conceptual stage, and not like siloing or relying necessarily nowadays on just internet and statistics and so forth. Really getting firsthand knowledge from people who've been there, done that, and getting a multitude of voices, and being able to really celebrate criticism, is extremely important. And we've said it at the beginning of the session, but if you're passionate about the product, chances are you'll do much better at it than if you're not. Passion and hunger, you got to be hungry in order to make it.